So this video is going to be a continuation of modified unit analysis in the frequency domain. Now the reason I chose to take this approach is because, as you may all know, I work in the field of medical imaging, and although ultrasound, 3D ultrasound is my area of expertise, I also have to deal with MRI. And so it is well known that in MRI, I'll just keep this simple. You can look it up yourself if you want to find out the details. But in MRI, what they do is they take the information that they gather from the MRI device, and they convert that information to the frequency domain. They do their Fourier analysis, and they extract signals from that analysis, and then they reconstruct that back into a medical image of the brain or of the head or of whatever part of the body that they are scanning. And so there is scientific, precedence for converting to the frequency domain, doing all the hard math in the frequency domain, and then converting back to the image space so that you can see what's going on. And so because I work in the medical field, because I work in medical imaging, I am familiar with this phenomenon. I'm familiar with how this works. And so that is why I am trying to figure out if there's a way that we can do all of physics in the frequency domain. And that's why I'm developing this specification. That's why I started working, developing modified unit analysis, right? Which adds, so, the unit analysis is actually very important in terms of interpretation. And so the main difference between modified unit analysis and standard unit analysis is I add a term to unit analysis called cycle. You can think of this as a clock cycle, a frequency, unit of frequency, unit of oscillation, unit of vibration. And this is actually, I embed this into the unit analysis. And so the units of frequency are delta per second, cycles per second, and the unit of time period is seconds per cycle. But today we're going to focus on this part of the specification here. This is the what I'm calling the potential inertia, which you could also think of as stillness inertia. So this is an object in stillness remains in stillness, or an object at rest remains at rest unless acted upon by an external force. This is also referred to as rest mass. And today we're going to be using this this quantum constant here, which I'm calling the quantum of potential. You could also think of it as the quantum of stillness of inertia, rest inertia, or the quantum of rest mass. Okay, so, and there's the companion equation that we're going to use that uses this quantum constant and a frequency of some sort to calculate the mass, the rest mass of a particle, the potential, the stillness inertia, or the rest mass, however you want to see it, of a particle. So in theoretical physics, there is a thing called the Compton wavelength, and the Compton wavelength is defined as a quantum mechanical property of a particle. Okay, so this is why I am using this Compton wavelength, which is defined as the quantum mechanical property of a particle. The quantum wavelength of a particle, yeah, it seems strange that a particle can have a wavelength, but this is how it's defined in standard physics. Okay, so the quantum wavelength of a particle is equal to the wavelength of a photon, okay, photon whose energy is the same as the mass of the particle. Okay, it was introduced by Arthur Compton in explaining the scattering of photons by electrons, known as Compton scattering. Now, I might do another video on Compton scattering once this video is done, and all the the information is in this video can be used to describe and calculate the Compton scattering. So just so you know, all of the values that I use in this video come from the National Institute of Standards and Technology, the NIST standard. And this is the code data, internationally recommended values of the fundamental constants of nature. And so the values that I use in my computer programs to do my calculations come from this standard. And so that is, I think it's important that you know where this comes from. I will leave a link to this page in the description. So again, by definition, the Compton wavelength is a quantum mechanical property of a particle. The Compton wavelength of a particle is equal to the wavelength of a photon whose energy is the same as the mass of the particle. Now, it seems very confusing. How can a particle have a wavelength? And what I'm going to show you is that a particle need not have a wavelength, but a particle can have a frequency. And it is this frequency that we're going to calculate. And because they associate the Compton wavelength with a photon, then I am justified in using this equation, which converts from the wavelength to frequency. So it converts from the domain of the wavelength to the domain of the frequency. And when you do this calculation, when I plug in this value into this equation, I get this value here, which is 1.2355, etc., times 10 to the 20 cycles per second. Okay, cycles per second. And the units work out to be delta over S. And we can work this out here. I work it out here just to show you. Again, modified unit analysis. Oh yeah, I want to show you one thing here. So here is the Compton wavelength. And in modified unit analysis, wavelength has the units of meters per cycle. Okay, in the international standard, wavelength has the units of meter. Just meter, not meters per cycle. But in modified unit analysis, I'm very specific that the wavelength is the length per cycle. And so I feel it's very important to put that cycle term in there. When you don't put that cycle term in there, I believe you're missing a very important piece of the puzzle. Okay, so this is very important. So here we are going to work out the units of this equation. So the units of the speed of light are meters per second. The units of the wavelength is meters per cycle, okay, which is equal to meters per second times cycles per meter. And of course the meters cancel and you get cycles per second. So this works out quite nicely. I think this is really neat and tidy. It's a nice way of doing it. There's nothing missing in the standard. If I just use meter, then I wouldn't be able to derive the units as nicely as I do it here. So this is how modified unit analysis does unit analysis, and this is ends up with the units of cycles per second as we want it to, because this is a frequency. So now we have a Compton frequency. So what is this frequency? What is it describing here? So this is where modified unit analysis specification comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this quantum constant, the constant of mass. Let's call it constant of mass because that is, for all intents and purposes, that's what it is. Okay, so we're going to plug this quantum constant into this equation, and we're going to plug the Compton frequency as the frequency here, and we're going to see what we get. Okay, so here's the equation. Some value m equals the quantum of mass times the Compton frequency. Okay, the quantum of mass is this value here, 7.3, and all these decimal points, times 10 to the minus 51. And actually, I just want to say something right here. If you're wondering why I have so many decimal places, because most standards don't have this many decimal places, but this is the number of decimal places that my computer program spits out. Okay, this is the maximum number of digits of precision that my computer has. Okay, it's got, 16 digits of precision, 17, but the last one is uncertain, so you get 16 digits of precision. And in reality, only the first 8 or 9 are valid, and the rest are uncertain. And so, but I'm showing all the digits because that's what my computer program is showing, and I think it's important to show all the digits. Okay, and so the Compton frequency, it has, is probably only accurate to about 8 or 9 decimal places, but I show all the decimal places. These other decimal places out here are uncertain. So when you take these two parameters, the quantum of potential or the quantum of mass, and the Compton frequency that we calculated a few minutes ago, when you plug those into this equation, you get this value here, 9.109, etc., times 10 to the minus 31. Now we know what this is, okay? This is actually the mass of the electron. Okay, this is from the NIST standard. This value was taken from the NIST standard, and you can see that it is accurate up until this about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, to 8 or 9 decimal places. It is very accurate. And so this tells me that first of all, my quantum constant is fairly accurate, and because it is able to calculate the mass of the electron to 8 or 9 decimal places. So this is good. This is good. Now we know what Compton frequency is. Okay, this is the frequency of the electron. Compton frequency in the NIST standard is the electron frequency. Okay, and so here we have it right here. It is in the order of 10 to the 20 hertz, which is super, super fast. So is there a such thing as a proton frequency? Okay, the proton frequency can be calculated using my equation if I rearrange it in terms of frequency. So the frequency of a particle is equal to the mass of the particle divided by the quantum of potential, the quantum of mass. And so when you so here is the proton mass from the NIST standard. Okay, it is 1.672, etc., times 10 to the minus 27, which is a very small mass. Okay, and so when you take the mass of the proton and divide it by the quantum of mass, you get 2.268, etc., times 10 to the 23. And that is in hertz. Okay, that is in cycles per second. Okay, so now we can calculate the proton Compton wavelength. We can go back to the wavelength domain if we want to. Okay, we don't need to, but if we want to, we can get the wavelength, which is wavelength is equal to the speed of light divided by the frequency. And so when I take this frequency, when I take the speed of light and divide by this frequency, we get the proton Compton wavelength, which is this value here, which exactly matches the standard up to about this point here. Okay, so these are, uncertain. So, but my calculation, when I do my calculations and I do my unit analysis, I end up with meters per cycle. So again, in the international standard, wavelengths are reported in meters, but in modified unit analysis, I report the units as meters per cycle, because this is the, if there was a such thing as a particle wavelength, this would be the wavelength of, or the length of one cycle. Okay, so I'm not saying that Compton wavelength is anything meaningful, but if it were something meaningful, these would be the more accurate units for the wavelength of the proton. So here I want to show you the two particle frequencies that I just calculated, the frequency of the electron. So now I'm not going to call them Compton frequencies anymore, because as I may have mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of naming things after people. I find it very confusing. I have a hard time processing certain kinds of information, and so I prefer to name things for what they are. Okay, so this is the particle frequency. Now, what this frequency refers to still remains to be seen. It could be the frequency of a standing wave. Now, Jeff Yee models particles as standing waves. So this could be the frequency of a standing wave of a particle. Or it could be the frequency of ether's circulation, because circulation has a frequency, and so it's possible that particles appear because of ether circulation, and so this frequency could be related to that. But that's not really what I want to get into right now. What I want to show you is how these frequencies relate to electromagnetic frequencies, because the original definition said that the Compton wavelength was related to a photon. And so let's see where these frequencies lie in the electromagnetic spectrum. So here is a figure of the electromagnetic spectrum. It goes from right to left. It goes from the lower frequency, larger wavelength, to the higher frequency, lower wavelength. Now on the bottom here we have the waves in terms of wavelength, and up here we have the waves in terms of frequency. And as you can see, so the frequency of the electron is in the order of 10 to the 20 hertz. Okay, and 10 to the 20 hertz is just a little bit above X-rays. So it's in the order of, it's almost between X-rays and gamma rays. Okay, and so it is well known that electrons are X-ray emitters. Okay, X-rays come from electrons, from electron interactions. And so it makes sense that the electron itself, the electron particle, the frequency of the particle must be at least must be above the frequency with which it can absorb and emit radiation. And so that is why the electron has a higher frequency, the electron particle has a higher frequency than the X-rays with which it can emit. So now let's look at the proton frequency. The proton frequency is in the order of 10 to the 23 hertz, and 10 to the 23 hertz is right smack in the middle of the gamma rays. Okay, and so it is well known that gamma rays come from the nucleus of the atom, generally from radioactive decay, but basically they emerge from the nucleus of the atom where the protons live. So again, it makes sense that the frequency of the proton is in the order of the frequency of the gamma rays, because that is where gamma rays come from, the nucleus of the atom. So long story short, this is how I use the quantum of potential, quantum of mass, and this is how I use the companion frequency equation, which looks very similar to the power equation and the force equation that I showed you before. This equation can be used to calculate the mass of a particle if you know the frequency, or the frequency of a particle if you know the mass. And so, and of course, because this is a frequency, relativity can be applied to this, but I'm going to save that for another video. So I hope this makes sense, and this kind of finishes off how these parameters are can be used to make real-life calculations that are very, very accurate. So again, I hope you're having a good day, and I'll be back.